I always believed that my married life was on the right track. I had a husband who loved me in a rare way, the kind of love you hear about in stories and think it will never happen to you. He made me feel unique, cared about every detail just to see me happy, and yet something inside me felt empty. Maybe it was the weight of routine, maybe it was my own insecurity, but I started to believe that something was missing, as if the brightness of my life had faded without me realizing when. I know that many people would give anything to live what I had, a stable home, a present, loving, faithful man. But at the same time, I carried a silent desire to feel something different, something that would take me out of the ordinary. It was as if part of me had grown tired of being only the perfect wife, and that part was craving novelty, emotion, a touch of luxury I had never experienced. I won't deny that this tormented me, because the more I looked at my husband, the more I asked myself why that emptiness insisted on existing inside me. It was unfair, I know, but feelings, when they're not well cared for, become dangerous. And I didn't realize how close I was to crossing a line of no return. It was at that point in my life that an opportunity appeared, unexpectedly. An opportunity that, in my eyes at that moment, seemed like a gift, but in reality would be the greatest trap of my existence. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to make the most painful decision of my life, a choice that would change everything forever. I will share with you every detail of this story. I only ask that you stay with me until the end, because what happened to me may serve as a reflection for many people who, just like me, believe that nothing can shake true love. And if this story touches you in any way, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It helps me continue bringing such intense stories like this one. The invitation came as a shock, a jolt that cut through my routine without asking permission. It was an ordinary afternoon. Like so many others, I was buried in reports, trying to keep my mind busy and at the same time escape the strange feeling that something was missing. He walked into the room with the same commanding presence he always carried, that air of power that seemed to fill any space. With a discreet smile, he asked if I would like to accompany him for dinner. Not just any dinner, but something special. His words carried the weight of a promise and the taste of temptation. For a few seconds, I stood still, unsure if I had heard correctly. My whole life until that moment had followed very clear rules. I had a husband who loved me with devotion, a house that sheltered me, a safe routine. But when I heard that invitation, it was as if a crack had opened, letting in a different light, more intense, almost blinding. I could have refused. I could have remembered my husband's smile when he saw me come home every day, our nightly conversations, the small gestures that, combined, made up a true love. But I didn't. Something in me chose to hesitate. And in that hesitation, doubt was born. I said I would think about it, trying to sound indifferent, but the truth is that my heart was already racing. The simple fact that someone like him chose me to be by his side that night made a hidden part of my ego awaken. The following hours were torment. Every time I looked at the computer screen, I saw my husband's old messages on the phone beside me and wondered how he would react if he knew. I felt ashamed in advance, but at the same time, I was unable to ignore the expectation growing inside me. When I finally replied, I accepted the invitation with trembling hands, as if I were signing a silent contract with the consequences. Later, at home, I dressed carefully. I chose a dress I had never worn, put on lipstick as if I were transforming into another woman. My husband watched me, curious, and asked if I had a company event. I answered with rehearsed naturalness, trying to hide the weight of the lie being born on my lips.
He believed me.
His blind trust was my greatest poison. When the luxurious car stopped in front of my door, my legs trembled. I got in and for a few moments forgot who I was. The smell of new leather, the softness of the silence, the security of being in a place so different from my reality, it all wrapped around me like a forbidden embrace. I was crossing an invisible line, and yet I did not step back. At that moment, something inside me screamed, like a silent cry for help. I thought of going back, thought of texting my husband saying I wasn't feeling well and asking him to pick me up. But pride, curiosity, and vanity spoke louder. As I looked out the car window, I felt trapped between two worlds, the woman who had everything to be happy and the woman who wanted to prove to herself that she could still be desired. And this is where I asked myself, and I would like you who are listening to me now to reflect with me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have refused and run back into the arms of the husband waiting at home? Or would you have gone ahead, as I did, driven by a dangerous mix of emptiness and fascination? Comment, because sometimes reading the perspective of others is the only way to understand exactly where I went wrong, or even if there was any chance I could have avoided it. The ride to the restaurant felt longer than it really was. Every red light gave me time to reconsider, but each time I thought of backing out, I looked at the man beside me and felt that the decision had already been made. He treated me with disarming naturalness, as if it were obvious I would say yes, as if he already knew that the routine of my life had worn me out. And his certainty bound me, as if I were just another piece in the game he was used to winning. When we arrived, the doors of the place opened before me like a portal. Well-dressed people, attentive waiters, a world of glimmers and whispers that made me feel small and, at the same time, special. I had never been anywhere like that, and the way everyone seemed to admire him, greet him with respect, made me feel as if I were stepping into a parallel reality. In that moment, guilt hid behind the sensation of wonder. I was no longer just the devoted wife of a man who loved me. I was the invited woman of someone powerful, and that title intoxicated me in a way that still brings me shame to admit. Seated at the table, in front of dishes I couldn't even pronounce, I smiled as if I belonged to that world. But inside me, there was an unrelenting voice repeating my husband's name. I ignored it, drinking from the expensive wine poured into my glass, as if I could drown my conscience in it. I didn't know, but in that very moment, there was no turning back. The unexpected invitation had become a ticket into a choice that would change my life forever. The moment I stepped out of that car and felt the soft carpet under my heels, I realized I had entered another universe. The city lights reflected on the glass walls of the building, and for the first time in years, I felt as if I were part of a movie scene rather than my own life. The doorman opened the door with a reverence that wasn't meant for me, but that somehow extended to me, and in that instant, I tasted the intoxicating sweetness of being seen differently, not as someone's wife, not as just an employee, but as someone who belonged, even if only for that night, to the world of privilege. Inside, the restaurant gleamed. Chandeliers spread warm light across tables draped in perfection, the scent of rare flowers mixed with expensive wine, and the sound of discreet laughter floated through the air like music from another realm. My heart pounded, not only from the beauty around me, but from the realization that I was enjoying it. That truth hurt, because it meant that part of me was betraying the simple happiness I once thought was enough. He guided me to the table as if I were the centerpiece of the evening, and people turned their heads to greet him. In their glances, I saw admiration, envy, curiosity, and all of that spilled onto me. I was someone in his company, and that was enough to cloak me in an importance I had never felt before. As I sat down, I looked at the menu and realized I could not even pronounce the names of half the dishes. He smiled, ordered for both of us with a confidence that silenced my insecurities, and I let myself be carried by the rhythm of his certainty. Wine was poured, red and deep, glistening under the chandelier, and when I sipped it, I felt it burn and comfort me at the same time. It was then that the first wave of guilt tried to rise, reminding me that my husband was probably home, maybe cooking something simple, waiting for me with the same tenderness as always. The thought made me want to cry, but instead, I smiled at the man in front of me. It was as if I had locked my conscience away in a corner just to feel the sparkle of that night, without interruption. Every detail seemed designed to seduce me. The way the waiters leaned in with respect, the way the music filled the space without being intrusive, the way his words seemed to weave a net where I was the only captive. I laughed at jokes that weren't that funny. I nodded at stories I barely listened to, but inside me there was an awareness growing stronger. I was falling deeper into something I knew I shouldn't. And yet, the more I resisted the thought of stopping, the more irresistible it became. I knew that I was drifting further from the woman my husband loved and closer to a stranger I had never met inside myself. There was a moment, I remember clearly, when I looked at my reflection in the polished glass beside our table. For a split second, I did not recognize the woman staring back. She seemed glamorous, confident, desired. But behind her eyes, there was an emptiness, a hollowness that no luxury could truly fill. That image pierced me, and I wanted to escape, but I stayed. Because leaving would mean facing the truth, and I wasn't ready for that truth. And here, in the middle of all this sparkle, I need to ask you something, almost like a confession spilling out of me. What would you feel if you saw your own reflection turn into a stranger before your eyes? Would you run from that version of yourself? Or would you, like me, choose to keep pretending for just a little longer? Tell me, because sometimes I think my mistake wasn't only in accepting the invitation, but in allowing myself to believe that being someone else for a night would erase the void inside me. As the evening went on, the dishes arrived like works of art, each one more exquisite than the last. I tasted them all, and with every bite, I felt as though I were tasting not just food, but a life that didn't belong to me. The glances from nearby tables told me I was part of a story I didn't write, and yet I kept playing my role. My laughter grew louder, my voice softer, my gestures more deliberate. I was becoming the character the night demanded of me, and somewhere in that performance, I lost track of the woman my husband knew. Hours passed, but time seemed suspended, wrapped in golden lights and the sound of clinking glasses. When we finally left the restaurant, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I had floated through a night of illusions, heavier because I knew I was already too deep to pretend nothing had happened. As the car door closed behind me once more, I realized the sparkle I had chased so desperately was already fading, leaving only the shadow of choices I could no longer undo. When the night should have ended with the last sip of wine and the polite goodbye at the restaurant door, I felt an invisible thread pulling me further, a thread woven from curiosity, vanity, and the intoxicating sensation of being wanted. He suggested we go somewhere quieter, away from the eyes that had admired and judged us, and my silence was my consent. I could have said no. I could have claimed I was tired, that I had an early morning waiting, but instead, I allowed him to guide me once again, as if my will no longer belonged to me. The city rushed by through the tinted windows, lights flickering against my reflection, and with every passing street, I felt my heart beat harder, not only from desire but from fear. Fear of what I was about to do, fear of what it would cost me, fear of becoming a version of myself I would never be able to undo. I thought of my husband at home, maybe checking his phone to see if I had texted, maybe setting aside the blanket we always shared on the couch, maybe just waiting for me without any suspicion. The contrast was unbearable. I should have shouted, told the driver to turn around, run back to the life that still belonged to me, but I didn't. I sat there, breathing too fast, feeling the heat of temptation swallow the voice of reason. When the car stopped in front of the discreet motel, I froze. The neon sign glowed faintly, indifferent to my inner collapse. For a few seconds, I prayed for something to happen, a call from my husband, an emergency at work, any excuse that would save me from myself. But nothing came. Only silence and his expectant gaze, confident, almost certain of the outcome. That certainty pierced me because it meant he already knew how fragile I was. I followed him inside, my steps heavy, my soul screaming, but my body obeying. The room smelled of perfume and cold air conditioning, the sheets perfectly stretched as if waiting for us. I stood by the door, trembling, feeling the weight of the moment suffocate me. This was the line. Crossing it would mean destroying everything I had built, every promise I had made, every dream I had shared with the man who had given me his whole heart. But temptation has a cruel way of disguising itself as freedom, and I convinced myself, just for an instant, that this night could be separated from my life, that it could be locked away as a secret never spoken. I surrendered, not because I didn't love my husband, but because I betrayed myself first. I betrayed the part of me that knew better, that whispered, begged, pleaded for me to stop. I let myself fall into the arms of someone who only saw me as a passing indulgence, while the man who truly saw me, truly loved me, remained in the dark. And in the middle of it, between stolen touches and the silence of my own conscience, I thought of him, my husband, and my chest tightened until it hurt. I wondered if he would ever forgive me if he knew, if he could ever look at me the same way again. And deep down, I already knew the answer. He wouldn't. He couldn't. I had turned the sacred into something fragile, and nothing would rebuild it. And I want to ask you, as I confess this, not for judgment, but for understanding. What do you think a person deserves after such a choice? Should someone who ruins what was pure be given a second chance? Or is betrayal the kind of scar that forever stains love? Share your thoughts, because even now, I still don't know if the worst punishment was losing him or having to live with myself. When it was over, I lay there in the quiet, staring at the ceiling, and the reality of what I had done sank in with an unbearable weight. The luxury, the sparkle, the illusion, it all crumbled, leaving only the truth. I had crossed the line, and as I got dressed, as he called the driver again with his casual air, I realized he would move on easily. For him, it was just another night. But for me, it was the night that split my life in two. The woman I had been, and the woman I had chosen to become. Walking out of that motel, the city looked different, colder, harsher, and I knew no amount of light would ever erase the darkness I had carried out with me. I thought secrets could be buried, that silence could be a shield strong enough to protect me from the consequences of what I had done. For days, I tried to act normal. I cooked, I laughed, I kissed him goodnight, and yet inside I was hollow, carrying the memory of that night like a wound hidden beneath my skin. But guilt has a way of seeping through every gesture, every glance, until it becomes impossible to disguise. He noticed. At first, it was in small things. The way I avoided his eyes when he asked how work had been, the way my smile faltered when he spoke about our future, the way my hands trembled without reason. I told myself he would never know that love had made him blind to my flaws. But love, real love, sharpens perception. One evening, he confronted me, his voice quiet but his eyes searching for answers. He asked if there was something I wasn't telling him, if I had been distant because of stress, or if there was something deeper. My heart hammered against my chest as I denied it, but my voice cracked, and in that crack, the truth began to escape. The moment came like a storm. He had found the messages, the subtle exchanges I thought I had deleted, the tiny fragments of my betrayal left behind like ashes after a fire. When he held up my phone with shaking hands, I felt the ground vanish beneath me. His face, that face that had always softened when he looked at me, was now twisted with disbelief, pain, and something worse, betrayal. I tried to explain, to minimize, to say it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but the words sounded empty, hollow lies against the enormity of what I had done.
He didn't yell.
He didn't break things or curse me. His silence was louder than any rage. He just looked at me, as if trying to reconcile the woman he loved with a stranger standing before him. And in that silence, I understood that forgiveness would not come. His eyes told me everything. The trust was shattered, the bond severed. That night, I lay awake beside him, but it felt as though a wall had been built between us. He turned his back, and though his body was inches away, I had never felt so distant from him. Days turned into weeks, and the bitterness of discovery lingered in every corner of our home. Meals were quiet, his laughter vanished, and even the way he touched objects around the house seemed heavier, as if every movement carried the weight of my betrayal. And I need to ask you, because sometimes I feel suffocated by the memory of that look in his eyes. What would you have done if you were him? Could you find it in your heart to forgive the person who tore apart your trust? Or would you, like him, choose silence and distance as a shield against further pain? I wonder, even now, if forgiveness is ever truly possible after betrayal, or if the scar it leaves makes it impossible to look at someone the same way again. The bitter discovery didn't just destroy him, it destroyed me too. Because in seeing the depth of his hurt, I saw the enormity of what I had lost. His love, once so steady, now felt unreachable, like a language I no longer understood. He stopped saying we and started saying I, and each time he did, it was another reminder that I had torn us apart. I wanted to beg, to kneel, to promise I would spend my life trying to rebuild what I had broken, but deep down I knew that some things cannot be rebuilt. Once glass is shattered, even if you piece it together, the cracks will always show. And I had not just cracked our love, I had shattered it. The discovery was bitter, but the aftermath was even worse, a slow unraveling of the life we had built, thread by thread, until all that was left was silence, regret, and the heavy presence of a man who could no longer look at me without seeing the ghost of what I had done. The days that followed his discovery became a slow descent into a reality I had never imagined for myself. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, grew colder with each passing moment. He still lived beside me, still shared the same roof, but it felt as though I had been exiled from his heart. The silence between us was no longer comfortable. It was sharp, cutting into me every time I tried to bridge it with meaningless words. He responded politely, sometimes mechanically, but the love, the tenderness, the spark that had once lit his eyes when he looked at me, it was gone. I began to understand that my choice had cost me something no apology could ever restore. It was not just his trust one had lost, it was the version of myself I used to be when I was loved by him. I tried everything to repair the damage. I cooked his favorite meals, I waited up for him at night, I tried to bring up memories of when we were happy. But every gesture seemed to bounce off the wall he had built around himself. And the cruelest part was knowing that he still loved me. I could feel it in the way he lingered in the room before leaving, in the way his hand almost reached for mine before pulling back, in the way his voice broke when he spoke of trivial things. He loved me, but he could not forgive me. That contradiction became my prison. To be near someone who still carried love in their heart but could no longer give it freely to me was unbearable. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake, listening to his breathing, remembering the way he used to curl into me, and now feeling the vast distance even when our bodies were only inches apart. My chest ached with the weight of absence, and yet it was a punishment I knew I had earned. And sometimes, when I allowed myself to drown in self-reflection, I thought about how unfair it was for him. He had given me everything: loyalty, devotion, patience, and in return, I had offered betrayal. How could he ever forgive that? How could he ever erase the image of me with someone else, laughing, touching, giving a part of myself that belonged only to him? I started to see the price of my choice, not only in his silence, but in my reflection too. I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. She looked older, more fragile, stripped of innocence. I carried shame like a second skin, visible only to me, but heavy enough to crush every attempt at happiness. And I have to ask you, because sometimes I wonder if my punishment is harsher because of my own conscience. Do you believe love can survive betrayal, or is it doomed the moment the line is crossed? If you were in my husband's place, would you try to rebuild, or would you, like him, turn the love into a memory too painful to touch? Share your thoughts with me, because even now, I am haunted by the possibility that maybe I ruined something that could never be saved. The price of my choice revealed itself in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the loss of his affection, but the emptiness of our home, the awkwardness in the presence of friends who noticed the change but didn't dare ask, the isolation of being next to the one you love and knowing you no longer deserve their touch. The silence stretched into months, and every day was a reminder that one night of illusion had dismantled years of devotion. I thought the guilt would lessen with time, but instead it grew, because with every sunrise I woke up to the same reality. I had chosen wrong, and the cost was permanent. He never screamed, never insulted me, never sought revenge. His punishment was far greater than that. It was the absence of forgiveness. It was the slow withdrawal of everything that once made me feel alive. And the cruel irony is that I now understood the value of what I had only after losing it. The price of my choice was not just his love, it was the realization that I would spend the rest of my life carrying a burden that no luxury, no temptation, no fleeting desire could ever outweigh. The weight of guilt is unlike any other burden I have ever known. It does not announce itself with thunder or storm. It seeps quietly into every corner of your life, into every glance, every word, every thought. I carry it with me as I move through the house we once shared so fully, as if the walls themselves remember what I did and whisper it back to me when I am alone. I see him in my memory at every moment, his calm voice, the way he would reach for my hand before remembering it was better not to, the softness in his eyes that no longer belongs to me. I replay the night of my surrender endlessly, analyzing every detail, wishing I could erase the choices that led to his pain. Sleep eludes me because each time I close my eyes, I see him turning away, the weight of my actions pressing down on both of us. I wonder if he ever forgives himself for trusting me so completely, for loving me so openly, for believing in us when I could not. And in that reflection, I see my own cruelty, my own selfishness, my own inability to stop myself when I had the power to choose differently. The guilt is not a single moment. It is a river, widening and deepening every day, carrying me farther from the person I used to be, farther from the warmth of a love that I will never hold again. I try to be kind. I try to apologize without words. I try to make amends in small gestures. But the truth is that some mistakes are irreversible and some hearts, once broken, cannot be mended. And sometimes I catch myself imagining a life in which I had said no, in which I had returned to his arms, in which I had chosen love over the illusion of sparkle and luxury. But imagination cannot undo reality. I cannot unlive the moments that shaped this chasm between us. I cannot reclaim the trust that I shattered, the intimacy I violated, the sacred space of marriage that I allowed to crumble. Living with that knowledge is exhausting. It is a constant ache that follows me into every interaction, every smile, every attempt to appear composed. And yet, even in this heaviness, I still reflect, I still hope, I still tell my story, because there is a strange release in confession, in laying bare the truth of who I was and what I did. That is why I need to share this with you. If this story reaches your heart, if it moves you even slightly, please consider subscribing to this channel. Each subscription is a way of keeping stories like mine alive, of preserving the voices of those who have suffered, and of acknowledging the weight of human experience. And while you are here, I want to invite you to leave a comment, share your thoughts, reflect on your own experiences, or simply honor the memories of people whose lives have been shaped by love, betrayal, and regret. Your words matter, and they give voice to those who have felt silence for far too long. Finally, I encourage you to watch other stories on this channel, especially those collected in our playlist, each one filled with emotion, lessons, and confessions like mine. You can find the link in the description or pinned comments. By doing so, you continue this chain of memory, empathy, and human connection, and help keep alive the stories that might otherwise fade into silence. Carrying this guilt has changed me forever, but telling it, sharing it, and listening to others share their own truths is a small light in the darkness of regret, a reminder that even in pain, there is understanding, there is reflection, and there is the fragile hope of growth.